podcast is sponsored by SynergyRx, a healthcare technology company using pharmacist-led clinical services to improve medication adherence and patient outcomes. SynergyRx works alongside physicians and other healthcare professionals to deliver coordinated, high-quality care. Welcome to Empower Her RX, the podcast where women in pharmacy share their voices, victories, and visions for a stronger profession. I'm Lindsay McCoy, joined by my amazing co-hosts, Pam Marquez and Katie Bell. Today, we are talking about mentorship. So we wanted Empower Her RX to have a strong focus on mentorship among women in pharmacy. And we thought a great way to get started with our podcast is to start there. So mentorship is defined as a nurturing process in which a more skilled or more experienced person serving as a role model teaches, sponsors, encourages, counsels, and befriends a less skilled or less experienced person for the purpose of promoting the latter's professional and personal development. So there's a lot to unpack there, but fortunately, we have someone with us today that is going to help with all of that because she's literally written a book on it. So we're going to talk about what mentorship really means and why it matters with Dr. Andrea Sikora. Thanks for coming on with us today, Andrea. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Andrea Sikora, PharmD, MSCRB, CCCP, FCCM, FCCP, is an associate professor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine in the Department of Biomedical Informatics. She holds an adjunct faculty appointment at the University of Georgia College of Pharmacy. She graduated from UGA College of Pharmacy and is the author of 2 books, Pay It Forward, A Map to Mentorship in Medicine, which we will be discussing today, and Integrate, a guidebook for making great healthcare teams. So, Andrea, thanks again for being with us. And let's just start with kind of what inspired you to write Pay It Forward and talk about mentorship.
So I hit a point in my career where you're in this interesting phase where you're still kind of young in your career. So you're looking at all these people that have helped you along the way, but also you now are teaching and mentoring others. And so I found myself as almost like the sandwich generation of mentorship and career growth. And I started looking at, some of the relationships are really rich, deep, complex relationships. There can be these really powerful moments that people speak of when they think of friendships, family, those types of dynamics, but also strife in a way that there can be conflict. And I started looking for resources to kind of spoke to this and really came up empty handed. While there are some good books on mentorship within the healthcare space in particular, I felt like there was a big gap.
That's true. I feel like sometimes we all think we're on an island by ourselves, just trying to run our teams without necessarily the thought of who can help us get there. We're just told, just do it. Figure it out as you go.
Well, and I think the other part of that is, both to speak to what Andrea said and Katie, you go through this illustrious career in education, and then you did residencies after residencies and on and on. Then, you continued your education. Through all of that, you're attached to somebody for training, and then you graduate from those programs and you're dropped off in the workforce and you don't have a mentor really anymore or somebody to guide and direct. It's like, okay, you have a degree, especially in the profession of pharmacy, you have a degree, step in here, start running the marathon. And so that's where you lose connectivity or lose that mentorship that you had while you were in college or in your residency or fellowship and postgraduate training.
Yeah, and I really think that when I look at some of the key moments in my career that kind of got me to places that I wanted to be, it was because I did have someone who was there at the right time saying, you should think about this or do that. And how that to me was really a secret sauce to success and fulfillment and all of those things that make a career worth doing.
Absolutely. Let's talk about kind of, I put in, that textbook definition of mentorship, but what is it for you? How would you define mentorship, what it is and what it isn't?
Yeah, so you have a great definition of mentorship that I think works really well. I think within that, I think other components of mentorship is that it is bi-directional. So it is not just a mentor imparting, advice and thoughts to a mentee, but that the mentor is also growing as a result of that mentee. Either that maybe the mentor is watching a mentee go through unique challenges that they have not had the experience to go through, so they're going to ask for advice or thinking through different components maybe. And sometimes it's also as simple as the mentee bringing in new ideas and new strengths and skills. I also think the concept of shared altruism is very important. The mentor and the mentee are both reflections of each other. And so a mentee goes to a national conference with the mentor on their poster or as an acknowledgement. How you act throughout that conference is a reflection on your mentor, but vice versa. So, like when I make decisions as a mentor to advocate for certain things or support certain things, I also am aware that my role or my reputation and stuff is also something that is hopefully benefiting the mentee. Um, and then, let's see, beyond shared altruism and the bidirectional component, I think you're also looking at what is, mutual growth. And I think this is a really interesting thing. I think one, a mark of a good relationship, no matter if we're talking about mentorship or anything else, be it friendship or something, really any dynamic is, does that person help you grow and become a better person, like a version of who you are? And I do think that is a definition or a component of a high quality relationship in many domains. But within mentorship, it is a specific goal. And that can be different than maybe a friendship in that you are looking for that person to, I don't say take a critical eye, but an appraising eye of your life and what you're doing and say, hey, have you thought about this? This is something where I would be, thinking to, develop more skills and stuff like that in a way that maybe is a little different than a friend. You think of a friend, you're going to go vent, for a while and you're not looking to solve or have solutions. And while a mentor can provide that listening ear, I also think that part of the role of them is to have the listening ear and to have some hot takes on what's going on too.
And I think that's so interesting to have it as a two-way relationship because, I mean, while I've never done the formal mentorship, like how you've described it, I think that every time I've had a student come into my pharmacy, I'm always so inspired by like how they got to where they get when I give them a project to work on. I'm like, I never would have thought of it that way. Or because they're just so young and like full of energy and just like, but, in your article of Rekindling the Fire that you put for the AMG, J of healthcare system pharmacies, you did different terminologies of what you thought, the different terms of mentorships, which was like advisor, sponsor, coach. And do you feel like you can transition from those different spots in mentorship, or is mentor and mentee really the only term that you need when you need these like more formal takes?
Sure. So I think you can wear different hats for different people in different points in time. And so like I have a very someone I've known for many many years. He started off as a preceptor. So a very formalized preceptor resident type dynamic. He said this is what we're reading this week or this is what we're doing and I would say yes. Like that is kind of how that dynamic is. And from there involved a much more what I would say informal mentorship relationship, which is he was someone that I went to for advice and maybe to do a little venting too, but also for advice and consultation. But that was not a formalized relationship within the context of the residency program. He was just someone that I chose to seek out. Um, in contrast, during that residency program, we were required to have a kind of like an advisor, or they did call it a mentor, but I think the more technical term would be advisor of record, which was someone who ideally you had some type of, connection with, but they were officially required to attend your monthly evals and to come to your quarterly evals and to review and kind of say like, how are you doing? What can we be helping you with? So that you had someone who was looking at the whole process of your year and truly helping you graduate. And to me, that is what an advisor is that they are a time delimited relationship with a very specific goal in mind: graduate PharmD, graduate residency, get through this particular project. And in some cases, that person that was formal could also be an informal relationship. relationship. And when I ended residency, I maintained informal relationships with both of my advisors. And now I would call them mentors because they're not helping me in a specific goal anymore. Going back to the original guy I was talking about, who was preceptor to informal mentor, I come to a point in my life where I'm doing my master's of science in clinical research, and they want a thesis committee. And so in that thesis committee, I needed to find two different advisors that could be in those roles. And he was one of my advisors. And so you could see you're putting on different hats in different situations, depending on what is going on. I think that the reason that I find this important is that it helps you to like if you think about DTR, it helps you to define the relationship. What are you guys doing together, and why are you interacting? So I also think about, sponsorship and coaching can be other kind of components of this. So coaching is to me a more of a delimited, you want to get better in a specific area. So I had yet another guy who was an excellent grant writer. And I would say that I kind of brought him on originally as a coach in the space of grant writing. Well, he's also a wonderful person and had a lot of other things. And I would say that our relationship has blossomed into more of a mentoring relationship. But I think also think about you go on a first date with somebody and then they're like, hey, so about kids. And you're like, whoa, like we don't know each other that well. Like, I don't know if I want to have this like super intense relationship with you. So sometimes it's better to be like, let's start with coffee and just have coffee. And I think that's where coaching, you can say, I would like to be coached in this specific area. And if you find that there is a spark or that you guys have a connection, then great. Maybe it moves into another dynamic, but it can also be okay that maybe that's not someone that you particularly want to have an in-depth relationship with, but they're super good at that one skill that you want. And sponsorship, finally, is another element that I think is important as you move forward in your career, which is that over time, unfortunately, around the time that you start thinking about Botox, you start also thinking like, maybe I could be somebody that can help other people because I have stature in certain areas. And so I think about the fact that like I've had leadership roles in ACCP or SCCM. Well, they can say, hey, do you have someone in mind for some task or like we need help with a newsletter or whatever? And I can sponsor someone that I am mentoring to come in and give them a new role or to recommend them for a talk or things like that. And I think that's a really, really important part of the ecosystem to reach your full potential in pharmacy is having people that are intentional sponsors.
Yeah, that is so much information, and I appreciate you expanding on that because my mind of like I have 900 more questions now than I had when we started. But one thing that was on my mind that I wanted to discuss today was sort of defining the timeline. And I think the timeline makes sense if you're a student or a resident or a fellow because you're in an institution where you have a yearly contract or whatever that defined timeline is. I think that timeline becomes blurred when you become employed. And then I think that may be where we are really missing a huge opportunity for mentorship. And I'm thinking about my own businesses. When I bring pharmacists on within our company, I should be assigning them a mentor to oversee their growth throughout while they're with us. But I wanted your take on that. Do you see anybody doing that? What does your research show? What is your opinion on when you become an employee? And then what is the timeline for a mentorship in that type of relationship?
So I agree that I think I call it early and mid-career mentorship, and I have had takes on mid-career mentorship too that I think we also have gaps there where suddenly you're 5, 10 years out and they're like, oh, you should know what to do. But in fact, like you're still growing, you're still encountering new situations that you want insights on. I think the first year in particular in a new job is a really, really important time to have an assigned advising or mentorship program that you have people partake in. We know that mentorship improves retention in various companies. And at the hospital I worked with in Augusta, we had a kind of a new employee or new preceptor kind of mentorship program that we would bring people in that had formal and informal elements. And I really wish that I saw more of that in other dynamics, certainly in the academic circles, we see this. So I had an assigned mentor for my first year. And as you're going through like the promotion and tenure process, you'll often have a mentorship committee that you have to form. So even in this role right now, I have 3 members on my mentorship committee. And that is like officially written down. I submit it to my chair. I have to meet with them at least once a year to kind of talk about where I am. And I do think that those are really important constructs because they do help you to fuel engagement. And I wish that we did more of that. And I think the national organizations are doing better in finding, trying to make those matches. But the more the merrier when it comes to that type of relationship.
Do you think that it makes a difference if you have someone saying you're going to mentor this person, or if it's a mentee coming to someone asking for a mentor? Or I guess you could be like a mentor going, I would like to mentor you. Which one tends to be the stronger of the relationships, or does it even matter?
The key concepts I think is ignorance is not knowing what you don't know. So I think some people who have never had a mentor, they don't know what they're missing. So if you just say like, "Hey, go find one," they're going to be like, "Yeah, whatever." And they'll put it on their piece of paper and they'll move on. So I do think at times that structure can be very useful to helping bring people in and saying these are the scheduled touch points that we're looking for within, this particular dynamic or this particular relationship. In terms of like who approaches who, I think there is a very kind of an old timey way of thinking this that the mentee should approach the mentor to say like, hey, like you're someone I admire or someone I want to work with, and can we find some time to meet? And I do think that that still is an important aspect because the mentee should to some extent be helping set like what they're looking for in terms of their goals. On the flip side, I also have a strong belief that like you can be someone who you see someone and you're like, I would like to help that person. I think I could be useful. And I definitely think that like the mentor can make the first move. And again, I think sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming to get an email like, will you be my mentor? Or can I mentor you? But what you can say is that something like, I really appreciate all the things you're doing in this space. I think you're doing great things. I would love to talk to you about what your career goals are, or I'd like to, provide some insights if I can in this space or provide opportunities. If you want to set up some time to chit chat, like let's do that. And I find that those type of emails are 4 sentences or less. It's usually something like who you are, something nice that you say about that person, like I have liked you from afar for these reasons. I could imagine that we have a point of connection, pick the topic and, let me know if you want to talk. And sometimes you have a 30-minute conversation and it goes nowhere, and that's okay. I still think that 30 minutes was a good thing. And sometimes it blossoms into this like super meaningful relationship. And I have examples where I've had 30-minute conversations that I actually barely remember the contents of, that someone comes back and is like, oh, you changed my whole, trajectory. And I met these other people and blah, blah, blah. And it was kind of like in there, I get why I don't remember much of it. I wasn't the right person for them. And they knew that, but it also inspired them to go find the right person for them. And that's very cool. And on the flip side, I've got people that like my current fellow, I actually emailed her first as a third year student. It was just like, you really stood out. And I would love to talk more about what you're doing. And here we are, almost 5 years later in this relationship. But I don't think either of us saw that coming from that first email. So you never know. And that's, I think, the power of a 4-line email. You're not out much, but you could be in a whole lot.
I
Such
love
a
that.
cool
Yeah,
concept.
the 4-line email of just simple, straightforward, and kind of that structure that you mentioned. That's a really good thing that I'm gonna be
The
using.
whole, what do you have to
Yeah,
lose?
Yeah.
right. And as the person writing it, you're out less than 10 minutes. And if they never email you back, again, no big deal. But I have found in pharmacy in particular, most people are willing to write you back and sit down for a half hour and talk, especially when you make it like that, like it's no strings attached. But if we connect, it could be something really beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you. I like the idea too. I think there's so many things. I think all the best relationships are organic in nature. But organic doesn't mean lacking structure. And so I do think that you can find people when you're precepting or, through organizations or, networking events or whatever, you find someone you think there's a spark with and you reach out via this 4-line email or something like that. And maybe you have multiple conversations or touch points over the course of a year or so. And I think at the end of that, you might be like, hey, like, this is kind of a mentor mentee relationship. And maybe you do define it as such. But I often find that the best relationships are ones where both people want to be there. And so, although I think structure can help help people find those connections and find those sparks. Ultimately, to me, the most important mentorship relationships are highly informal. And I have mentors that like it's super structured. We only meet at work. We only have Outlook invites. Like we're never going to text each other, that kind of stuff. And I've got other relationships that are highly informal, where it's like we do most of our communication via text or email, or hey, are you around next week for coffee or something like that. And it is, but I think that's as unique as the 2 people that comprise that relationship.
Do you think it needs to be stated, like, what the purpose of this specific mentorship is then, or it can be all encompassing? To go back to Pam's question about, like, timelines.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One element that I would say is that I think people can be a little afraid of something that's super ill-defined. So it is helpful to say, like in that first kind of half-hour chat, like, I'm interested to hear about your career, or I'm considering making a career shift to this, so that people have something to work from, in that that's what they know kind of where you're going. Or for the guy I was saying that helped me with grant writing, like as our relationship kind of started to take off, we had this context that I wanted to be a federally funded scientist. And so he was thinking about me in those terms, and he'd be like, "Hey, have you thought about doing this?" and so forth. And so I do think a little bit of like what the goals are is useful. And some people feel very strongly that it's like the goal of this relationship is to help me get, more involvement in organizations or to become a better grant writer. And I do think that at times like some structure is good, but I also think that like there are times when it can be somebody they can have really meaningful insights into you that are outside of the official structure. So like my example for this is I did the ACCP's merit program, which is for becoming a scientist or a clinician scientist within the pharmacy space. And you're assigned a merit mentor who helps you complete the project. And while they are providing some professional insights, like their goal is to help you do the science project and learn the different components. But in that space, my mentor and I really connected, and she was in academia and a chair and had leadership. And I remember we met for coffee at a conference, and I was like, I'm so overwhelmed by my precepting schedule right now. I don't think this is really working for me. And it was because I was managing the ICU and research and all these different things. And she's like, well, what if you asked about doing academic rotations or research rotations where the students could help you in that space? And so that would like help with your schedule. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. But I would have considered that very much like a more of a holistic take on where I was at. She also had insights at one point where she was like, "Do you feel like this institution has the pieces that you need for to take your research to the next level?" And that was hard to hear, because it is like, well, what you're saying is, do I need to find a new job? But at the same time, like that also prompted me to have other conversations along the way, and again, leads me to where I am today. So yes, I think it's helpful to have some goals, but I also think that like finding someone you just connect with and has good insights into your life, they may have pieces that are far reaching, I guess.
And if someone doesn't have a connection, like you think you're gonna have a connection with a person and it's just like you're not vibing, is there like a good sign off for that four-line email of like, "Thanks, but this isn't what I was looking for." Or they've got too many
So
thoughts.
yeah, or too many thoughts. Yeah, so what I usually do is if I really liked what happened in that first 30 minutes, I will wait a day and then write back with
I
like,
love it.
"I
It's so
really
much like
enjoyed
dating.
this." Yeah, it's so much like dating. I really enjoyed this. I would love to get your thoughts on something else. And I sometimes it's like this paper, it's right here, or like I'll be in touch in the next month because I've been working on something and I'd like you to take a look at it. And usually, if the connection's there, they're like, yes, let's like, I want to do that. And you can see that there's engagement. It is so much like dating in
Mhm.
that way, or so much like an early friendship, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side, if I didn't really feel like that person and I were like really going to connect, I just write something really nice back, like, thank you so much for your time. I got a lot from this, and that's it. And I just don't leave a hook of like how I'm going to get back in touch with you. And, there has been a couple of times where someone like that, even though that person and I didn't think I connected, a year, 2 years later, they're like, "Oh, I was thinking about that conversation and you recently, and like, how about this or whatever?" And then we end up chatting some more. So it can also be a seed that's far more slow growing.
Or something that
But I think
not in the right time at the
Yeah.
moment.
right. Right. I remember one person, like, we realized we were basically competing for the same funding mechanism on the same deadline, which put us as like direct competitors. And it was like, I really have a lot of respect for you, but like, this is not a good time for us to be like trying to exchange ideas or see if like we should connect more, because like that it's just not a good space for us. So like we talked in, like it was like probably a year later, but then we had this like really great conversation at a conference that like I took information from, and now we like will see each other, and there's usually something I'm getting. So that I would consider that like a very, I don't know if I would even call it totally mentorship, but it is a nice relationship to have. And I do feel comfortable that I could email her with like a question and she would give me a thoughtful answer. And sometimes like that's also a really nice thing. Is just like, can you email someone and it not be weird? Like that's a great point of connection, right? You know?
Yeah, there's so much in and out and I guess flexibility. Just I mean, just like with dating and relationships with your significant other, you grow and change and morph together or separately, and it kind of depends on your season of life and where you are and where you're going, and so being able to kind of transition that to even that mentor mentee relationship, and and again that the different hats of sponsorship um and preceptor and all of those other things, just that it's more about that core relationship and how it can flex and mold with each individual. I I appreciate that.
And that's part of what I liked so much about it, was that well, what I found was it I think mentorship can have a degree of intimacy, and what I mean by intimacy is emotional vulnerability. You're putting yourself out there of like, you're telling this person like, "I didn't get the job I wanted," or "I got this really hard feedback." And that intimacy does remind me of romantic relationships and family and friends, in that you put yourself on the line. But there's also this like side of like the professionalism components of, where do we draw our lines in terms of like, are we going to talk about family and kids, or maybe we're not? And so that is part of what inspired me to write this book, is that it was like, this is a really complex, rich relationship that it is can be really meaningful, but it's not like you're sitting there with a bunch of rule books or approaches for like how to manage that. And I guess I found it just interesting to ponder and think deeply about.
Yeah. I'm particularly intrigued about how mentorship can empower women in
Yeah.
pharmacy. Not opposed to men, but specifically, how can mentorship empower women? And what has your research found on that?
Yeah. Mentorship is huge for women, and is like, to me, absolutely essential. There are so many ways to kind of slice and dice this. One aspect is that there's actually been a couple of different papers in New England Journal of Medicine. They were perspective pieces that was actually talking specifically about the role of having a male mentor in your life. And one of the things that I've loved about a good male is like, sometimes they can use their privilege to help you. And so like, I've had situations where I feel, I don't know, maybe I don't want to say insecure, maybe unsure about something. And I love the kind of like, I don't know, male confidence where they're like, "You're great. You should definitely go for that." Like, of course you should put your name in the hat. And to them, there is no question. And I'm like, this is really a very different take than maybe some of my female mentors, who are going to be much more cautious in some of their approaches. There's a lot of there's a in research that says that men will put their name in the hat for things they're not technically qualified for, but women read the qualifications and will put their name in the hat. And when I read that, I was like, okay, I can act more like a guy in that way. And then also having male mentors, they're like, yeah, put your name in. But like, technically, like this job that I have right now that I love so much, technically a PharmD was not qualified. And I was like, I'm going to take my chances that they don't really mean that, and that they really mean that they want to have someone who is a clinician by training of some degree and is federally funded. And here I am. And so I think about like that, thanks to the male mentors in my life, like I kind of take that more approach. But then what's interesting is I have female mentees, and they're like, "Oh, Andrea, I just put my Andrea hat on today. You'd be so proud of me." And they do the same thing. And then they get the things. And so I do think that is a very important part. The other aspect is, I mean, finding having women supporting women is a beautiful thing. But I also think we, in general, bring a very connection, nurturing oriented approach to all of our relationships. And think about like right now, I've got a text thread with three other female investigators. And you talk about like really strong women who want to see other women succeed, who are super supportive. And like one day we're talking about like toddlers throwing up on you. The next day we're like, yeah, you need to put your name in the hat for that chair position. Like three of them basically advocated to help me win a major award recently. And like that's pretty powerful and pretty special on a lot of levels. So like there are people that I look to for support in life. Like I will say like, oh, like this thing happened, that was sad, but also like very much a tacit looking out for each other. So yes, I it's very, very important for women.
Well, I think that just puts the exclamation point on everything that we're trying to do
Yeah.
with our
Yes.
women's initiative. And I laugh as I sit here and look at Lindsay and Katie because we've had that same conversation about the men who have empowered us along the way, who've given us stairs or one step at a time to climb the large staircase. And so you just described that so beautifully as to exactly what our mission is, one woman at a time, building each other up, opening the doors, creating opportunities, and paving the way so that other women have the confidence and the support to go for the big job and the big promotion and everything they deserve, and while all balancing life.
The
And so
toddlers.
we couldn't have chosen a better guest today. I'm so excited now that I'm probably not going to sleep for days because this was exactly what we want to do. And
Yes.
so you're the expert who's going to help guide and direct us as we reach out to, lift all women. Is what we want to do. So, so happy.
Yeah, no, it's been really special. I mean, I think about as another, female, and I'd say mentor, but maybe friend too. But like she was I mean, wonderful from a scientific perspective in terms of like giving insights and camaraderie and stuff in the grant writing space. But like I remember right after I had my son, she was like, we were texting a little bit, and I remember she was asking something, and I remember I told her my blood pressure for some reason, and this she's like, I just you seem a little off, and, I think your blood pressure's a little soft, and I feel like people aren't saying that, like, maybe just drink some more water,
Yeah.
like, and, like, kinda, like, hydrate yourself, and I was like, "Okay," and I did, like, I, like, made an effort to, like, drink my Nalgene and stuff like that, and all of a sudden, like, my blood pressure did get above a map of 65, and I was like, "Bing," like, oh, yeah, like,
There it is.
I need to be like, "Where is the baby?" Like, I need to go get him from the nursery and, like, do all this different stuff, and, like, "Where's that breastfeeding consultant?" and all these things, and it was such a funny moment of critical care to be talking about my map to this other, like, female pharmacist who was, like, so supportive and sweet, but also, like, it was such an insightful thing to say that, like, actually did probably improve that course for me, but, like, in between, we're talking about grants, and, like, that is something where, like, I don't know there's not another friend in my life that would have been able to give that insight, nor another mentor, and so, like, yeah, that is the beauty of, like, professional women, like, being in each other's lives, like, you never know where it's gonna touch.
How
Exactly.
how do you
Yeah.
think people can go about, like, advocating if they want to be a mentor to someone that, like, they are able to be approached? Is there, like, a network or some kind of, like, are associations the best way to do that?
I am a deep believer in the associations, and I do think that the associations have a lot of power. Finding your professional home is an important part of like a pharmacist's journey. And people are like, "Oh, it's $300 or $400." I like, I'm not denying that professional organizations are expensive and like but I also feel like I have the money is so well spent in terms of like what I have gotten in terms of the return on investment, both from like meaning in my career, but also situations where like I remember I paid for an organizational membership and then someone asked me to give a talk that was paid. And so like in some ways I broke even on that,
Yay.
but the talk
Mhm.
was very fulfilling to do, and so it's like all of those components. Um I think one of the best if you want to be a mentor, and one of the things you can do is like reach out to folks. So like there's been like there used to be a more active presence in my opinion on Twitter than there is now. And maybe LinkedIn is maybe the better social media forum for that. But I remember there was one guy on Twitter who I really enjoyed his content, but he was a relatively new practitioner. And I remember I DM'd him and I was just like, I really love your content. You seem like you're doing really cool things. Like if you ever want to talk about career stuff, like I'd love to chit chat. And so we did,
That's
and
such a
we
throw in
had
your
Yeah.
ring when,
Just go for it.
yeah, and again, he could have been like that weirdo and not said anything back, and that'd be fine. But now, like every so often we talk on the phone, we have a good conversation. I've been able to recommend him for a couple of different positions and things like that, and it's just great to see him doing those things. So I also sometimes find that like students in particular, they don't know what they're missing. And so like it is a requirement if you go on rotation with me or you do any project with me, I am going to look at your CV. Like I just say like you're going to give this to me. And I that is how I like to use my power over a student is to say like please send me your CV and like let's talk about it. And I usually within the context of a rotation make sure that we have lunch at least once. And during that lunch, I kind of ask probing questions about career and interests and things like that. And sometimes there's someone who is going to go do something that's like so different than my life that like I probably don't have a ton to offer. But sometimes I do feel a lot of alignment. It's like, oh, we should have more conversations. So I guess like I'm kind of always on the lookout for people that I can maybe
such a
have.
to be like a micro mentor,
Mhm.
right? Like you just like,
Yes.
I'm gonna see your CV, we're gonna have lunch, I'm gonna ask questions
These
and
are
we're done.
standards.
Like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and it is a standard. And like what a great way to like again, like it's because they're a student, they have a hard time saying no. And like I love taking advantage of a student in that way of like I'm going to take you to lunch and we're going to eat some chips and salsa and we're going to talk about this for a little bit. And I find that almost every student, I feel like we have some moment that I like to think I improved something or was able to have a touch point. I've had one, she actually works in my lab now. We went to lunch when she was a resident. I remember walking away thinking, I don't really think she likes me that much. And I don't really know if this will ever be a thing. And then meanwhile, she's texting another resident who I'm far closer with, like, Andrea is so nice. This was so great, blah, blah, blah. And so I got a screenshot from the other resident who's like, you never saw this, but just so she does like you. And now we're like very close collaborators and stuff like that. So you never know. I had another one where I had a student. I remember walking away from that particular lunch thinking, we probably won't talk again. And that's okay. Like it's not nothing bad. It's just I'm not
Yeah.
gonna go there. And as we're ending, somehow she talks about how her parents have one extra AKC registered master champion duck hunting like lab puppy that they don't know what to do with. And I was like, could I have that dog and give it to my
Oh.
parents? And she's like, "Sure, we just wanted to have a good home." And so, like, Sophie the dog is upstairs right now and is, like, my dad's, like, newest child, and that's because I took a student to lunch. And again, not a student that I felt like I had some strong connection with. So, yeah, you never know what
You
can
just
come
don't know
from
what you're,
those.
and that's the two-way
Yeah.
relationship, right? You don't know what you're gonna offer or what they can offer you, but by just taking that chance of like, we may have a connection if we just explored it a little bit. I feel that way when I
Yes.
go to conventions and associations and you hear the people talk and you're like, that's so interesting. So you kind of like look deeper into the speakers' like careers or what they're doing. And then you find out like you just start following the thread of like what they've got going on in their life. And they're such interesting people. And I think like that's such a cool way to think about finding a mentorship or offering one.
Yeah. I think putting yourself out there similar to again friends and dating, it's a great way to have those relationships. And again, like I think for every relationship that I've got, there's many others where like I was not the right fit for that person. And like that's okay to me. It's not like I'm not really looking at my rejection rate so much as my like was I able to help somebody in some way.
And you, again, you don't even know till years later, maybe that you
Yeah.
had an impact on this person and didn't even know it. It's like that little ripple or butterfly effect that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
So I wanna pull something you said about your Twitter friend, that,
Yeah.
you little thing, but, that DM and you keep in touch every now and then, but you said it's really cool to see kind of what he's been able to do. And so I think that's just a small piece of this whole like pay it forward concept. So can you kind of expand on that and what does pay it forward mean to you as far as in the context of mentorship?
Poof.
It means you
Um,
wrote a book on it. So that just read the book.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so definitely read the book. Highly recommend. It's not a perfect read, but I do think it has some good concepts in it. So I guess I'll end with a couple of stories, and hopefully that will help answer the question. So the first was for me as a pharmacy student. I was a decent test taker, and I didn't have to do that much to do okay on
Pause.
the tests.
Andrea,
And so
I
I was
went to school with you. You were setting the curve. Like you were the top. You're amazing. So just to like
Wow,
retrospectively
she
like
really
give
tried
you
to pull
like
the
you were always someone I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's so good at this." Someone to look up to.
I, I appreciate that. Um, and it's also funny to hear that in the way that, like, I don't think I made eye contact with a single professor during a lecture, and I doodled during class, and my friends actually knew I was in class because I would, like, text during class because my strategy was I would go home and, like, make these study guides, and that was how I, like, did things. But I guess what I was kind of saying is I was a little standoffish as a student in my own way. My boyfriend, now husband at the time, was like much more chatty than me. So he's like, you should talk to the other people and stuff like that. But in among that, I had a particular professor, Susan Fagan, who kind of saw me and was like, we should find some things to like where you can feel more engaged or care about different things than maybe this stuff doesn't speak to you as much, but like here's something else. And so she really gave me like the first, I don't know, like challenging project that really like I felt like I was not just that it was challenging, but that I could like maybe make a difference and like do something. And it was like at that point, like the spark turned on or like the light turned on of like, wow, this is really very I really like this and I like doing research and I like thinking about these things. But looking back, like I'm embarrassed to think about like probably I didn't listen to her in the stroke lecture at all and stuff like that. And yet somehow she was able to kind of like see through that and like reach out to connect and stuff like that. And so, and now she's like one of like 7 people that I have on my like little like Tiny Beans account that I send emails out of like what my son is up to. And it's like grandparents, aunts, uncles,
Susan.
and Susan Fagan. Um, like, and it's kind of but, like, that's like, that relationship is, like, wildly important to me, and kind of in that theme, like, as a resident, I learned very quickly that if you ask too many questions, then you would expose what you don't know, and then they would have you go look it up, and I didn't wanna do any more work than I had to. I was already plenty overworked and tired and stuff like that, so I was very good at being able to kind of, dodge, if you asked a question of, like, how to, like I would answer, but in such a way that, like, you didn't always know what I didn't know. And again, kind of standoffish in that. And one particular preceptor, the guy that I was saying was the preceptor that became mentor, all the things, named Brian, he figured out that like it was a defensive posture that I had about that. And I remember we went almost 2 weeks on rotation. He didn't ask me any questions about patients. And instead he would ask me like what book I was reading or if I like had a restaurant that I liked in the area and different stuff like that, like totally off topic and basically like kind of like help to like generate some trust. And then also would kind of like we would talk a little bit about the foibles of residency and things like that. But that relationship blossomed. Like one, I started to realize he was a very good preceptor and it was a very insightful thing to realize that maybe I needed someone to not be like just pestering me on do I know this and am I doing the right thing with this patient or not and needed I don't know, maybe some gentle hands in a different. And then when I kind of started to realize like what an incredible preceptor he was and pharmacist he was, I was like, it was so inspiring to like the reason I care about pharmacy workload and stuff like that was I was like, everyone needs a Brian in their MICU, you know? Um, and thinking about all the things that they have done for me over the years, the letters of rec and the encouraging cards and all the different things that have happened, like a it would be impossible to pay them back. And I also look back with a little bit of like, I was kind of a hard to love and at some points, and that is not something that you can pay back to them, but it is something that you can pay forward and think about like it's a debt that you can't repay, but it is a debt that you can hopefully put on somebody else. So it's like the best type of thing to put for somebody else going forward. And it is really cool. Like I've had students and residents who have come back and been like, I'm going to pay it forward. And then all of a sudden I do see them like with their mentees or something at a conference, or I have one of their people comes and is like, I was supposed to talk to you and I've been told about these things. And like, it really, I don't know, it's a deep point of satisfaction for me, not just in the like professionally, but like in my life. And so, like, I think sometimes we think of pharmacy community and that sounds very nebulous, but to me, that is like I feel like I am part of a community, even though it's stretched over the nation at this point.
Yeah. I think that's such a cool and powerful way to think about, like, it's a debt that you can't repay, so you give it to somebody else. How great. Like, what a
Yeah.
great gift to give to someone. Um, yeah, because you hear the term all the time, pay it forward, but to think of it as a debt that was given to you and now you're giving that debt I don't know, it just touched. So good job.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, and it really is, like, you never know, like, what that's going to be, and I've also had mentees where I also feel indebted to them as a result of, like, I've had, I mean, because sometimes mentees, they see you in a very unique way, and they can offer insights and support in ways that you don't necessarily see coming, and that I also think is the bidirectional component of things, and again, as I'm getting a little bit older in my career, I have former mentees who maybe I still have mentoring aspects to, but that I also go and ask for advice and, and insights, and they have really, cool things to say. And so, yeah, it's a great source of enrichment to the day to day career, and is part of what I love about being a pharmacist.
Well, everything that you've said, Andrea, it's I'm excited. I'm excited because I mean, within all of this, like we mentioned at the beginning, like we want to empower women in pharmacy, and we want to be able to provide those connections, and connection in that relationship is just core of everything that we've been talking about. And so I'm excited about being able to go forth with this great foundation that you're laying for us.
Yeah, I think you
You
guys are
may
doing
get
a
a
beautiful
four-line
I
thing.
do
email
have
from
a
me soon.
I do have a
Yeah,
personal question.
please.
Do you give
Yeah.
every resident or fellow or mentor a copy of your book?
I do actually have a stack of them, and I do tend to give them out now. Um, when I had rotations, I would make it required part of my rotation reading, and we would do kind of a topic discussion about both mentorship and then kind of, I would call it like career management, and we kind of talk about some of the key foundations in that space. And yeah, it's helpful. It became helpful because it was like all these things I wanted to talk about that I was like, where do you go and how do you illustrate? So yes, I do. You will eventually end up with a copy if you spend enough time in my space. It's like I wrote in some ways it's a book, in some ways it's like a textbook for me.
I love your stories.
Yes, it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
Andrea, thank you so much for being here with us today. Like I said, we're really excited to share everything that you've just spoken to with Empower Her RX, and we can't wait to see what we're able to do with everything and all the notes we've been taking from you. And again, your book is called Pay It Forward: A Map to Mentorship in Medicine, and you can see that. And it was a good read. I was able to highlight and have a lot of moments to reflect for myself in my own practice and my own interactions with students and things like that.
Same.
So I was really I bought this book before Empower Her X was a thing. I was just excited to see your name on it, honestly, as a fellow
Nice.
UGA
Thank you.
alum classmate. And so
Beautiful.
I was excited that I got to say, like, mentorship is the topic, and oh my gosh, I know someone who would be fantastic to talk to on that. So thank you again so much for being here. Yeah.
Yeah. My pleasure.
So as part of our um, Empower Her RX moment, we want to kind of end each episode with a little nugget or something that we can take with us. And today, what we wanted you, or we want our listeners to kind of think about, is paying it forward and what it means to you, and how you can find find ways to implement that for yourself and others around you, whether it's, maybe looking for a mentor to further your career, or being a mentor, putting yourself out there as that resource for someone. Thanks everyone for being here today. You can check out our website at empowerherrx.com. That's EMPOWHERX.com, where you can share your story and join the conversation. And we will also have a link to Andrea's book, Pay It Forward. Thank you.